opportunity of going out to the range and at 100 yards and 25 yards, compare a little bit this SIG Sauer 5.56 with the LE6920, or what I usually refer to as my Colt M4. Now you've seen this rifle with a scope, you've seen it with the EOTech, and you've seen it with the iron sights, which is my preferred method of firing this weapon. You've seen those things if you're familiar with the channel. So I'm going to set this aside and just really talk about this SIG 5.56 for just a few minutes. And this is, in my estimation, a good rifle. I didn't see anything with its accuracy, with its feel, with its look. I don't have any problems with that. And there's only a few problems that I do have with this rifle. Some are mechanical and some are just preference. And an example of the preference would be, first of all, we'll start with the sights. The sight picture for me, and this is a preference thing, the shape of this rear sight is triangular, whereas the rear sight on a 6920 or an M16 with the carry handle, any of those things, they have a round peep sight on the rear sight, and this has a triangular. And while you're peering through that rear sight, it is very noticeable that that is a difference. And to some people who haven't spent a lot of time on the M16 or the M4, it may not be a problem at all, but for me it was just a little distracting. Now if I fired 10,000 rounds through this, it probably wouldn't bother me at all. Now as far as mechanical problems with this rifle, at first it had some problems chambering the rounds, ejecting the rounds, and I found that this the system for chambering the rounds is really dialed in at the front of the handrail here, and it has a marking on it that says up, and that was out of its position just a little bit, and so it has some different positions. You can look on YouTube or get an owner's manual or something, look that up for yourself if you having trouble getting the rounds to cycle through this rifle. But once you set it up the way the factory wants you to set it up, it did pretty good, and I had no problems with it. It did have one failure to feed. I'm not sure if that was my fault. It was the first round after letting the bolt go forward and it didn't feed properly. That could have been my fault or the magazine's fault, so we'll chalk that up to just a bad luck, because it only did happen once out of a couple hundred rounds. So the sights, as far as preference goes, is a mark against this rifle for me personally. Now the thing that really is mechanically wrong with this rifle is this rifle is supposed to be a hybrid and a cross between a AR and an AK. At least that's my understanding of it. And so one of the things that really is, in my opinion, manufactured incorrectly about this rifle is it has a folding stock, and therefore a very European-like butt stock on this rifle that I think is meant for close combat operations only. And I don't think this rifle was set up to shoot at the range at all. I think this piece of machinery was manufactured for just invasions, house to house, and so forth and so on. But at any rate, the cheek weld on this rifle puts your line of sight straight into the back of the mounting system for the sights and so forth. In other words, when you're got a good cheek weld and you're looking straight ahead, you're running into the back of this mounting system, and so you would have to get really a chin weld to be able to look through the sights correctly. So I don't really like that. I don't think that's the optimal setup for this rifle, and because of that they've made this piece of plastic that snaps on and raises up your cheek weld there a little bit, so that with this plastic addition in place, it's a pretty decent shooter. Very accurate. This rifle is very accurate, and however, I have to say this about the rifle's accuracy. My Colt M4 has a 7 twist. This SIG 556 also has a 7 twist on the barrel. However, you have to be, in order to get that accuracy out of this rifle, you have to be extremely careful when you're utilizing the trigger, because this trigger is the absolute worst trigger that I have ever used in my life. This trigger is worse than some cap pistol triggers that I've seen, and it is, I mean, it is just absolutely the worst trigger. I've tried to adjust it, tried to smooth it out, tried to do some basic things that people do to their trigger systems in order to lighten them up a little bit, and this is really, it feels like a sponge. It's extremely difficult to use this trigger in an accurate way. If you want to take your time and squeeze off carefully aimed, carefully manipulated shots each and every time, then you won't have a problem with it. Although after firing about 20 rounds, my arms got a real workout right in here, just repeatedly having to squeeze the daylights out of this trigger. So I don't like the trigger at all. The Colt M4 stock trigger was decent. It's what we had in the service, and I was perfectly used to that and perfectly fine with it. I did put a Geisley trigger in my M4, so when I switched back from this rifle to that rifle, I actually had an accidental discharge. Thankfully, my weapon was already pointed at the target. It just went off before I wanted it to, and it was because of putting many rounds through this rifle, having to squeeze the daylights out of it. I just barely touched that trigger, and away she went. So this rifle doesn't have any problems with accuracy. A trigger job on this rifle would make it an extremely good rifle. If this is a hybrid, if it's a mixture between an AR and an AK, what I think they should have done to make this an exceeding great rifle would have been to put a tube and an M4 stock on it. And then you might say, if you did that, then it would basically be an AR anyway. Well, that's not true, because this rifle doesn't use a buffer system. You could have put a fake tube with no buffer system in it and still use this rifle's internal parts and pieces for chambering the rounds and so forth and so on. You could have used this setup, but just put a fake buffer tube. In other words, you could put a butt stock on it like this and make it an absolutely wonderful weapon. In this version with this buttstock on it, my personal opinion is that this is a piece of junk from here back. Well, I could say from here, including the trigger, back, this is an absolutely terrible rifle. The piston system, the accuracy, the sights that come with the rifle, that's wonderful. The buttstock is junk, the trigger is junk, the stock pistol grip is fine, everything else is fine, everything works pretty much like you would expect from a what I just call an AR-AK hybrid. It's got a lot of AR qualities right here from the pistol grip forward. It's got a lot of internal things that are different. The internals are different from an AR. So I think they probably should have went ahead and made, instead of trying to make a cross between the two, they should have went ahead and did some things to make a completely new rifle. I really don't see, after 40 years of development of the AR M16 type rifles, I really don't see the need for a rifle like this. Basically, they took AR ideas and tried to improve the AK serviceability. That's what I think. That's what I see. When I pick up this rifle and use it without ever having talked to anybody from SIG, what I see in this rifle is that they've taken some AR concepts and tried to improve this rifle, and then they defeated that by not taking advantage of the great trigger system that the AR has and the great buttstock that the AR systems have, and they kind of wasted the AR influence on basically the barrel and the hand stock. So really, I would say waste of time, waste of effort, when they could have made something in its own vein, I guess I would say, to sum it all up. So the EOTech did good, not great. I found some problems with it that wouldn't let me get right on target. When you see the target downrange, you'll notice some rounds that are off of the little sticky targets that I put up, and you'll see some rounds that are outside of those, and that was from trying to get a good zero at 100 yards. I couldn't do that with the EOTech. The EOTech on my M4 did fine, but the EOTech that was on this particular rifle, in my opinion, just failed it altogether. So back at 100 yards, this thing was, or excuse me, back at 25 yards, this thing did well with the iron sights. I probably should have spent more time and shot it with the iron sights at 100 yards, but as I get older and my vision fails me, it gets more and more difficult to do stuff like that. So what you'll see on the video is 100-yard results and 25-yard results. And like I say, this is not a terrible rifle. I think it's a good rifle. If they run it through a couple of more improvements, I think that they'll have a great product here. And I think more than anything, it's my opinion, after having dealt with the AR for over 20 years, I think that it's just, I'm used to that. You give this to a guy that's 24 years old and let him shoot it and go through the different evolutions of the rifle, he'd probably say the same thing after 20 years of service if he compared it to the AR. But the buttstock has to go and the trigger has to go. Other than that, it's a good rifle. As far as my Colt M4, I think this is a wonderful rifle. Get a Vietnam era guy and he might think this is a piece of junk, but we've come a long ways since the Vietnam rifle of this family. So this thing's come a long ways, and they've made a lot of improvements, and to me this is an excellent rifle. And after the same amount of research and development goes into this rifle, I'm sure they'll make this into a piece of equipment that a lot of people will really enjoy. But would I change from the AR to this? Not at all. Not at all. All right. Hope you enjoy. Have a great day. Four for the SIG, right target. For the final result, I had 4 shots at this 100 yards for the SIG 5.56. 4 shots for the Colt. 2 shots for the Colt Sierra Match King in the black. 2 shots with the SIG 5.56 are outside the black. That is just ridiculous. Hold that down. All right, here is 25 yards, 25 yards, SIG 556, and this round was shooter error. These were well aimed shots. The biggest thing I'm struggling with this 556 is the trigger. 25 yards, SIG 556, a little better. Took a lot more time on the trigger, but it is one terrible trigger.